Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I would like to welcome you to New Horizons, Emerging Metadata Standards and Practices in the 21st Century, which is presented in collaboration by the IFLA Bibliography, Cataloguing, and Subject Analysis and Access section. My name is Athena Salaba, and I will start with a few logistics. First of all, I would like to welcome all the attendees, the speakers, and the panelists. We have over 1,100 people registered for this webinar, so some of you may have to be directed to the YouTube live streaming. A few logistics to begin with. Please note that this event is being recorded, and that includes the chat. The information about the recording and a follow-up about the slides will be available through the website for the session. All of your microphones have been muted at this point, so please make sure that they stay muted if you're not speaking. Presenters and speakers, please make sure you unmute your speaker when it's your turn. I will have a little bit of outline of what we're going to have today. So initially we'll have some lightning talks where the different sections, review groups and committees will present their activities. I will not be presenting the speakers. There will be a slide for each speaker for them to introduce themselves. Following the lightning talks, we'll have a panel with 3 panelists who I will introduce later on when it's that time. At the conclusion of the panel discussion, we'll open up for questions. Please make sure to use the Q&A to post your questions, and we will make sure that we read out loud your question when it's answered. Make sure to put both questions for the lightning session and also the panel session, and we'll put them in order of panel versus lightning talks. Next, I would like to start, if we can, with our speakers for the lightning talks. Harriet is our time keeper, so thank you, Harriet, for keeping us in time. I also would like to thank the planning group who worked hard to present you with this session, and that includes Pat Riva, Chris Oliver, John DeSantis, Katarina Sinnermark, Matilda Koskas, Melanie Ross, Rania Osman, Vincent Blay, and myself. Welcome. Harriet, if you can advance to the next slide.
Hello, everyone. I am Rebecca Lubas. I am privileged to be the secretary of the Bibliographic Standing Committee. And I wanted to talk to you today a bit about a project of the Standing Committee. So Harriet, could you go to the next slide, please? We have been able to do a new version of the Common Practices for National Bibliographies in the Electronic Age. It's a slight name change to show how we want to communicate that these are suggestions and good practices, but not proscriptive. This has been a long time in the making. The first version was quite groundbreaking, and it was published as a web publication with separate sections to navigate. And as time has progressed, we've re-edited it to be a single PDF document. I'm very pleased to share that if you go to the bibliographic section projects page, you can find it. It is essentially a pre-publication. We will be submitting it to IFLA to make it an official publication, but you can use it right now in the form that it's in. We have some great plans to get some translations into more of the official IFLA languages. Right at the moment, it is only available in English, but there are also plans to have yearly updates, since the format is a bit easier to update now, being a single document. For my point of view, the greatest addition of the document is that there are more examples now. Besides just updating the document for some practices that may have been a bit out of date, having actual examples from national bibliographies around the world is probably the greatest asset of the document for some real life advice to look to. So we hope you find it useful. We want feedback. Even though it's in the publication process, we can continue to add and improve and plan to do this on a very frequent basis now. Thank you so much.
Okay, can you hear me? I'm Vincent Boulet. I'm the chair of the Cataloguing Standing Committee. Could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. The main focus of the work led by the section is closely linked to the consequences of the publication of IFLA library reference model, and because of the work on standards is and must be one on the heart of the IFLA work as a whole. And in this regard, we are working there with a close relationship with a committee on standards. We are working on the impacts on these standards on the professional practices. For instance, the shift toward catalogs based on entities and relations is really crucial and has heavy impacts on the cataloging practices. This is why we are working on this action plan. You can see it here in 4 main directions. The first one is to maintain consistency on the vocabulary used in the different IFLA standards, and the work on multicat is really crucial. Multicat is the multilingual dictionary of cataloging terms and concepts, and it contains definitions for many terms used by the library cataloging community. And these terms are available in English and in a variety of other languages. And we are ensuring consistency with the international cataloging principles, which include guiding rules that should be included in the cataloging codes, as well as the guidance on search and retrieval capabilities. The second focus regards the adaptation of professional competencies and the potential impact on training, and we are eager to work with the section on education and training in this on this point. And the third focus regards promotion and advocacy of the work on standards and cataloging practices, and it includes our participation in the IFLA Metadata newsletter. We are publishing jointly this newsletter with bibliography and subject analysis at access sections. And if you want to be kept informed on the news on cataloging and standards issues as a whole, this newsletter is for you. And the fourth point regards authority control and identity management. Identity management is one of the main leverages of the evolution of the metadata ecosystem, and we are keeping working on important tools for catalogers as names of person and anonymous classics. And for instance, this year we have published a new page on Chinese names. And you can go to the next slide, please. And if you want to find more information or on the section's activities and the right people to connect, please go to the section webpage. Thank you.
Hello, Athena Salaba again. In this occasion, I'm wearing my hat of the chair of the Subject Access and Analysis and Access Standing Committee. Next slide, please. The SAA section standing committee is doing its current work through working groups, the 3 working groups. You can find details about our activities in the section by following the link to the website. In 2018, the genre form working group launched the ongoing project called Compilations of References and Vocabularies Related to Genre Form. Since December 2020, the project has been opened worldwide with an invitation to the professional community to contribute to the cooperative bibliography. The bibliography consists of 2 parts, a compilation of relevant literature and a compilation of genre form vocabularies. You can submit a proposal for inclusion of either a literature or a vocabulary by using the forms that are available on the working group's webpage. The cooperative bibliography will be updated every 6 months or as needed. The first update was in May 2021. Both literature references and vocabularies lists are available on the working group's website. The second group, TESA, the Training and Education in Subject Access Working Group, reviews and assesses the scope and depth of specialized knowledge and skills required to support subject analysis and access information services. TESA collaborates with a number of other related fora, associations and other groups that are interested in library and information science education and training to provide recommendations, promote and inspire education and training for subject access in a knowledge organization. In its inaugural year, TESA focused on 2 tasks, a core literature survey addressing knowledge, competencies and skills in the area of subject analysis and access, and a review and analysis of the knowledge topics related to this field, as they are specified in professional competency standards worldwide, and created a comparison table to identify competencies and skills. The survey will be complemented by an analysis of curriculum in LIS programs and also job descriptions. Once we finish the analysis of collected data, the group is planning to complete gap analysis. Then with a final goal is to make recommendations for subject analysis and access education and training that is supported by a comprehensive list of related skills and competencies. The third group is the Automated Subject Analysis and Access Working Group. The creation and maintenance of subject vocabularies and subject indexing to provide access to information has traditionally been a manual or human endeavor. With more advanced technologies, linked data and semantic web, and of course, artificial intelligence applications, the group's Automated Subject Analysis and Access Working Group is set to explore the current state of and the future opportunities for automated subject analysis and access. Some of the questions we are exploring include how much can a machine do without human when it comes to subject analysis and access? To what extent is AI applied to this area? What are some of the benefits and challenges? To start this exploration, we currently have a call for papers that will be published in a special issue of Cataloguing and Classification Quarterly with the theme Artificial Intelligence and Automated Processes for Subject Access. You can follow the link to see the call. Last, we invite you to join the IFLA subject mailing list to find out news about our group. You do not have to be a member of IFLA or any of its committees to subscribe. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melanie Roche, and I am the chair of BCM Review Group. Next slide, please. This past year, the review group's work is focused on two aspects, which are outreach and integration. As far as outreach is concerned, I am very, very happy to announce the publication of 3 new translations of the IFLA LRM into Chinese, Italian, and Portuguese. A huge thank you and my heartfelt congratulations to these communities for this work. We are also currently working in a process of updating the content of the RG's web pages, aiming to provide more intuitive and easy to access content, as well as a whole new section for training materials, so stay tuned for that. Now, as part of the 3R project that ended last December, the RSC has produced maps from RDR classes and properties to IFLA LRM entities and relationships. We are currently reviewing these maps and we'll send our feedback to the RSC very shortly. And of course, this is a very first step toward further integration of IFLA LRM into the wider community. But now Pat will tell you about another important one.
And hello, I'm Pat Riva, and I'm chair of the LRM-00 working group. So LRM-00 is the implementation of the library reference model as an object-oriented model, and more specifically as an extension of the object-oriented model used in the museum community, the CDOC conceptual reference model. And now CDOC is the Committee on Documentation, the unit within ICOM, which is the International Council of Museums, which is concerned with resource description for museum collections. CDOC CRM had a major milestone this year with the approval on March 8th of version 7.1 as the new official version. LRM-00 will be compatible with this new approved version. Since LRM-00 is an extension, any implementation of LRM-00 also requires the implementation of certain classes and properties from CRM. These are carefully identified and listed in LRM-00. Once completed, LRM-00 will replace and supersede the currently approved object-oriented model, FRBR-00 2.4, which is from 2016, and which is based on an earlier version of the CDOC CRM. So LRM-00 simplifies many aspects of FRBR-00, which was often seen as complex. To assist implementers to transition to the new model, LRM-00 will include migration instructions. The working group consists of myself, Melanie, and also Maya Zoomer and Trond Alberg. We've actively continued developing LRM-00 since I last reported in 2019. We think we've identified the last small items that need to be brought to the CRM-SIG for discussion and approval, which we expect to do at the next meeting, planned for June 22nd to 25th. And after that, we should have a complete draft that can be made available for comment. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gordon Dunsire. I'm a member of the ISBD Review Group, and I'm also a member of the ISBD Manifestation Task Force. Next slide. The International Standard Bibliographic Description is very much in a transition mode right now. Just recently, another task force of the ISBD Review Group updated the ISBD to take account of an accumulation of minor revisions and updates that have been requested over the years, as well as significant expansion of coverage to new areas, including manuscripts or non-printed materials, cartographic materials or maps, and the component parts of manifestations. This recent update and the extension of coverage is clear evidence of a continuing utility of the International Standard Bibliographic Description, its use in the community, and indeed its support by the communities. Ongoing is a development of an alignment of the ISBD with the library reference model, which, as we're hearing so far in these lightning talks, is a very significant development for IFLA. The LRM is a model. It is not intended to be used directly for cataloging purposes, and it requires an implementation, and that is the area that ISBD currently occupies and intends to occupy in the future. Of course, the ISBD itself requires some form of encoding of the metadata it produces, and the IFLA standard for that is UNIMARC. So ISBD sits in a continuum of IFLA standards, which taken together produce metadata that can be used in our systems and for our users. The project to align ISBD with LRM is currently focusing on the manifestation entity. That's just one of several entities introduced by the LRM. Manifestation entity was chosen because it is the closest to the instructions and stipulations that the ISBD currently offers. However, even with this close relationship between ISBD's resource and the LRM's manifestation, there is still likely to be a significant impact on the granularity of ISBD elements, what sources are used for metadata, how the metadata is laid out and displayed for end users, and indeed what kind of format the ISBD will be published in the future. There's many other aspects to this work. We are in the middle of it, and at this stage we don't have anything to show the outside world, so we beg your patience. Finally, all of IFLA's standardization for metadata operates in a wider world. And ISBD, like all the IFLA standards, has to take account of what's happening in that wider world and the impact and utility of IFLA standards. The main area, of course, of interest is the continuing support of global bibliographic control by IFLA, with the addition of the new technologies of the semantic web, the new namespace infrastructure for IFLA, and the excitement being generated by Wikidata. We still have to take account of the needs of national agencies, of course, and the other factors that make ISBD so successful. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joseph Hafner. I'm chair of the LIDATEC. Next slide, please. Thanks for the opportunity today to share information about our IFLA namespace, which launched in July 2020. This was the culmination of several years of preparation and efforts by the members of the Linked Data Technical Subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of IFLA's Committee on Standards. From that subcommittee, I'd like to thank the members and especially Anders Cato, who worked and led this project until 2019. Several members of other IFLA committees participated in this project. Thanks to them for their help to reach this point. We also contracted with metadata mavens to build, host, and manage the site, and the team there includes John Phipps and Diane Hillman. Thanks to them. And finally, a special thank you to Helen Mandel from IFLA for all of her support and collaboration. This was a real group effort to make this launch possible last year. So thanks to everyone who helped us get there to make it happen. So the standards there on the IFLA namespace now are FRBR, ISBD, Multicat, UNIMARC, and the LRM. For an example of the standards that work in a linked data environment, the RDA toolkit now links to the LRM on this IFLA namespace site. We're really pleased when that collaboration started last year. We're working with various committees from IFLA, including the ones on this webinar today, to update their standards and add other standards. If your IFLA committee wants to add another standard, or if you would like to link to one of the IFLA standards, please feel free to contact me, ask me any questions you have, and I'll be happy to talk to you and talk to you about how it works or what the possibilities are there. Use the feedback button on the site to contact me. The URL is easy. It's iflastandards.info. It's the URL on this slide. We manage the site using GitHub behind the scenes, which makes it fairly easy to keep things up to date. This is a work in progress and updates are added as we have them. Going forward, this is the place where you'll find the most up-to-date versions of the IFLA standards as linked data. These are freely available on this open access website, which is currently paid for by IFLA to make this possible. As time goes by, as standards are deprecated, like FRBR, we'll still keep them available here in their final form on the site. So I encourage you to visit the site and explore it and the standards. Thanks for the opportunity to briefly talk to you about this exciting project with the IFLA namespace. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Héloïse Lecomte. I'm the French representative at PUC, Permanent UNIMARC Committee, and I will present the PUC's current work on behalf of Gordana Mazic, who is the chair of the committee. Next slide, please. So my slide reports only on UNIMARC adaptation to the IFLA library reference model, or in, sorry, I have trouble with my video, sorry. Or in other words, how we have been working since 2012 and how we are still working on the UNIMARC format structure to enable the use of UNIMARC for entity cataloging. So to be clear, I will not report on other aspects of PUC actions, as there were no major achievements in these areas last year. So first, I'd like to recall a principle that was validated in 2012. In FRBR and then LRM cataloging using the UNIMARC format, works and expressions are described in the authorities format as special authority records with special access points. The bibliographic format is supposed to be used only for manifestation attributes, unlike in MARC 21. So it's a huge difference, and it means that a lot of bibliographic fields or subfields in the UNIMARC format are being progressively deprecated, at least in the context of entity cataloging. So what happened at PUC 2020 meeting that we held in September and October last year during several days? So we discussed the UNIMARC to LRM comprehensive mapping, which is an ongoing work. There is no publication to date. We created some new fields in the authorities format for works and expressions attributes according to LRM or to RDA3R cataloging code for more precise attributes. For instance, we created new fields in UNIMARC A for the category and form of a work, for the intended audience of a work or an expression, for the form of notation of an expression, the color and sound content of an expression, etc. We also created, for instance, new values in a relationship control subfield, $5, in order to express all the types of relationships between works that are defined by IFLA LRM. We also worked on bibliographic coded data fields deprecation, as I mentioned already. So UNIMARC can now be used to create proper full work and expression records. There are now two paths for UNIMARC users. Either they can use the UNIMARC format for traditional AB, authorities bibliographic cataloging, as they have always done, and data exchange, of course. Or either they describe work and expression attributes and relationships in the authorities format if they wish to do entity cataloging and data exchange. Just an important information to conclude. The new fields, subfields, values, etc. that I mentioned have not been published on the PUC page on IFLA website yet. We are a bit late this year, So you'll have to wait a few more days or weeks for the editing process to be finished. So don't click on the links I provided on the slide you can see if you want to learn more right now about 2020 new fields. And please be patient. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Again, if you have questions about our lightning talks, please add those to the Q&A and we will address them after the panel discussion. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our panel discussion, New Horizons, Emerging Metadata Standards Practices in 21st Century. I would like first to introduce our three panelists, which I'm very thankful for agreeing to be with us today and discuss some areas. So first we have John Horodyski, who is a managing director with SaltFlats for Insight and Analytics, and his expertise includes digital assets management, metadata taxonomy design, and data analytics, among others. He also teaches as an adjunct faculty at San Jose State University in the United States, and his new book titled Metadata Matters is scheduled to be released by Taylor and Francis later this year. A second panelist is Frédérique Joannic-Seta. She is the head of metadata department at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France and co-chair of the Bibliographic Transition French National Program, and has presented on topics of bibliographic transition and innovative uses of metadata. Our third panelist is Ángela Quiroz. She is working at the Library of National Congress of Chile, at the section of Information Reference Sources, Department Information Resources Production, and is a member of the IFLA Cataloguing Section Standing Committee. She has served on the RDA board as the National Institution Representative for Latin America and the Caribbean, and published and presented on RDA implementation in Latin America, and specifically in Chile. Welcome. So what we will do is I will ask three questions. They are loaded questions, so each question has many questions in them. And I will ask each of our panelists to provide a response and discuss this area. And then we'll keep again the questions at the end of the panel discussion. I will start with our first question. Last year, within the broader metadata realm, the speed and effectiveness by which our professionals reacted to challenging situations also provided us with the opportunity to seek out different solutions. Can we discuss some ways we have seen that worked well in expediting the implementation of changes and the ways we work? More specifically, do these changes open the path to thinking about standards, practices, and tools in a different way, but still meet our goals to describe information resources and provide the best access to our users? Will these changes stick around? John, I will start with you.
Thank you very much. So this past year has all been about change in our behaviors as well in our methods of work. I, for one, am all excited about the change. And I'm reminded by the powerful and inspirational poem by Leslie Dwight in this last year when she wrote, "What if 2020 is the year we've been waiting for? Our year so uncomfortable, so painful, so scary, so raw, that it finally forces us to grow. A year we finally accept the need for change." And I think many people in our profession really took that to heart this last 2 years and started thinking more about what good change they can really bring to products and services and metadata management. I have seen much more new interest in optimizing service offerings for things like artificial intelligence work, as well as really good integrations and connections with collaborative creative workflow systems. And I do think that in the spirit of change, it's connecting us more than ever before. And I really do think that's a really good thing to have. I was also excited by the realization that both virtual and remote work and its heavy reliance on collaboration is a reality. It's not a wish or a dream and something that really can be delayed anymore. 2020 and 2021 has really taught us that we are remote, and some of us may actually stay remote in the way we work. And that's a good thing to have that option available to us. And this goes beyond any sort of memes or quips about working in Zoom or Teams or any sort of Hangout meetings. It's about consciously working differently and using that collaborative technology to help us do so. When I was in library school, I remember learning that it was all about access. And I think librarians and archivists have always done a great job at this, because it is all about access to content and being able to deliver that content at the right time to the right people and with great ease. So it's great to see this great new interest in online and collaborative virtual work that we're starting to embrace. And I'm quite encouraged and optimistic for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Frédérique, I will go next to you.
Yes, the BNF is fortunate to have a very rich digital library, which is Gallica, which contains more than 8 million documents. If we had the slightest doubt about the need to continue enriching this digital library, the health crisis would have reassured us. The Gallica audience survey conducted in 2020 confirms that our users still want more digitized resources, and we will continue to digitize, and a better search tool within Gallica. So this strong demand will lead us to revise Gallica's data model, currently based on Dublin Core, in the coming years to a model that makes better use of bibliographic and authority data from our catalog. We have also seen an explosion in the number of requests to our data.bnf.frbr site, which includes BNF's RDF repository, which with 8 million connections. And this 20% jump should no doubt be seen in the light of the millions of records of works in the IFLA LRM sense of the term that we have loaded there, and which have been produced by computer calculation from the bibliographic and authority data of the BNF. But for the staff, and more specifically in the field of catalogs and beyond an accelerated and systematic learning of the tools of remote work, and I agree with John, I would say the three main lessons learned were: first, on training. It was necessary to completely recompose the training courses by applying new methods derived from educational engineering, distinction between formal and practical parts, use of video support, etc., which recompose the trainee as an actor of his own training. Secondly, a new cataloging process has been put in place to deal with physical works that are not allowed to leave the institution. In order to catalog remotely, the catalogers had to rely not only on the data provided by the publishers, which is already the practice for more than 70% of the legal deposit for books, but also on photographic reproduction of the covers and page of title and so on, which is novelty. And this experiment remains to be evaluated. And the last point is the drastic need to upgrade our IT equipment to full web applications, the absence of which was felt at the beginning of the crisis. And this will be the case for Noemi, which is the future metadata production tool of the BNF we are currently working on. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ángela.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the invitation. Well, what has been working well for us is to have access to the cataloging tools we use daily. Those tools should be accessible online to facilitate our work from home. For example, in the Library of Congress, we have some subscriptions to the RDA toolkit, Universal Decimal Classification Online, Category Line, etc. And also, I think it's necessary to have access to our own resources from home. For example, to our policies, our documents, repositories, and to our ILS, of course. And we have doing that using a VPN, for example. So I think these practical issues of doing our daily cataloging activities have been working well. And also, I think it is important that the directors of the heads of our libraries know about how we are using these cataloging tools, so they will include them in the annual budget, because sometimes the subscriptions are too high. But it's part of our job to let them know the importance of this issue and in this time of pandemic and thinking about the future. And the last part of the question, yes, I think some of these changes will continue. I think we'll increase the use of these subscriptions to our online cataloging tools, and maybe it will replace buying the physical format. Thank you.
Thank you. I will give an opportunity to each one of you to see if you have a response based on what each one of you said, or if you have to add something, whether it's about the standards or practices that maybe will be changing or thinking differently based on what we experienced last year. It looks no additions. Okay. So I will move to the second question, and I wanted to remind our attendees that we will have the questions available on our slides. So they are wordy and long, so don't worry, you will have them in writing. So when you want to redo, you can actually read them when you watch the recording. So our second question is about processes and humans. So many of our standards have been created for manual processes and human application. And on the other hand, we have system changes that some of them are very rapid, but some are slow. They take a lot of time to adapt to broader semantic web environment, for example, or other newer technologies, emerging technologies. How will standards development change as we move into a more highly automated environments? How do we envision human-machine interactions, and what kind of standards will be required? Can you talk a little bit about your vision of humans and machines co-working versus the focus on manual work by humans that has been the traditional way of thinking of metadata creation and vocabulary creation? And I will start with Frédérique this time.
Thank you, Athena. The starting point at the BNF is a former recycling economy of the data. Recycling is very fashionable, which means not recreating data when they exist on the web. When we collect documents through legal deposits, which is these documents are physical or digital, we ensure that the producers of cultural industries provide us with initial bibliographic data, which undergoes initial computer processing to adapt them to our cataloging format. Depending on the sector, these bibliographic data are then reworked individually for legal deposit of book, for example, or are integrated into the catalog by flow, where it will be subject a posteriori to quality control by batch for legal deposit of sound, for example. We're also working on including automated process in the cataloging chain, such as those based on ISNI. The principle being from the data provided by the publishers, including, if possible, the ISNI of the author, to today automatically create the link between the bibliographic record and the authority record. And we hope tomorrow, on the same model, to be able to create the relationship between the manifestation entity and the work entity. But for that, we need permanent identifiers for works like the ISNIF author. For audiovisual works, we will not be able to rely on ISNs, and this will probably be an area for development. For textual works, it's very regrettable that the ESTEC has been put on hold. In parallel with his automated process, we are putting in place a roadmap on artificial intelligence for the next 5 years, and we hope to be able to carry out experiments on certain aspects of the processing chain. IA could thus be used to catalog resources for which we do not have bibliographic data via the cultural industries, such as the legal deposit of web. But the most successful example of mixed human-machine processing in the work we are doing to bring our bibliographic and authority data into compliance with the IFLA LRM model. So we use a computer application called DataBot, which proposes alignment to the catalogers within the same group of entity, the final choice remaining with the cataloger. The cataloger can also vary the criteria of the algorithms according to the results, and preliminary correction work can also be carried out manually before the algorithms to improve its performance. Putting the 1,002,000 works online in data.bnf.fr is thus the result of a processing chain in which the performance of the machine meets the needs of fine human skills. It's clearly a challenge for BNF to succeed on a larger scale than within the metadata department in reconciling the expertise of the catalogers refocused on value-add tasks such as access points, and to rely on algorithms for the mass restructuring of data.
Thank you, very interesting work. Ángela, go to you next.
Yes. Well, I think the standards will naturally evolve and are evolving into a highly automated environment, as you mentioned in the question. They will be oriented to a machine language more than a human language, using URIs, identifiers, of course. So the cataloging processes will become more automated. As catalogers, we will need the necessary new skills, but I think not to become a part of the IT staff, but to be able to talk with them and let them know about specific requirements. We will need to be able to explain in detail how we want the catalog to work, or in what way we want the information to be displayed, or about the recovery process. For me, the human and machines co-working is part of the evolution of the cataloging processes because of this natural evolution. Although I realize that the manual work by humans is the reality in some libraries, especially in my region, and small towns or in small school libraries, where there is only one librarian doing all the work. So in these kind of places, the human-machine interaction and the system changes are much slower than in other libraries. Thank you.
Thank you, very good points. John.
Yeah, this is a great example of where we're seeing a lot of discussion and talk about the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning programs. And the ideas of AI and machine learning, they're really no longer science fiction anymore, let alone just fiction. And this is both exciting and a little bit concerning because it forces us to realize how important that data foundation is to use the types of computer intelligence we're trying to go for. We want the machines to learn, we want the machines to do more, but we must provide them with really good quality data in order to do that. So the time is really now to get our metadata in order to support all this AI-based technology. And that's something you can't skip. You can't skip that step. You need that in order to achieve all your human-machine interactive goals. So ultimately, I would say that the robots are waiting and they're ready to go. So let's give them what they need to do their job. We need to feed the robots good data in order for them to do the good work. And yes, ultimately, we all need to advise on the checks and balances, the ongoing maintenance as performed by the human factor required in the testing and the quality assurance of artificial intelligence development. The robots should not be working in splendid isolation here, but instead they need to be working with really good human interaction the entire way through the process. So always be mindful of the people, the process, and the technology working together to allow for learning opportunities. And if there's any visionary statement, I would say, I think metadata management for artificial intelligence sounds like a great new library course to be offering new professionals coming into our industry. That's what I would think. Thank you. Ángela agrees.
You're kind of leading to the next question, but first, before we get there, I wanted to thank you for bringing some challenges. First of all, yes, we have automation, we have AI, but they can be as good as the humans who have programmed them and provided the data for them, right? Otherwise, they can't do it. Hopefully, they can't do it without us. But also, Ángela's points about when we think about technology and we think automation and we think standards that are geared towards the automated processes, to understand that not all world is ready for it, not all users are ready for it. So perhaps we don't forget also our old manual processes in our standards. So we can't have just URIs when a library does not, they cannot do that, or there are regions where connectivity perhaps is not as good, etc. So very good points on that aspect. So based on, since John has started to talk to us a little bit about education and thinking about balancing the skill sets that we need, my third question is, in 5 years from now, and maybe less, we'll see how we progress. How do you see the bibliographic description and subject access evolving? So the metadata creation in the world, what competencies, knowledge, and skills, and what training will be required of the metadata professionals to be successful, but also forward-thinking in this newly emerging metadata environment? Of course, keeping in mind what we just said, in addition of advocating for this area, as Ángela mentioned earlier, of we can be forward-thinking, but do the administrators or those who make decisions understand what we're trying to do? So I will start with Ángela this time.
Okay. Well, yes, I think, as I mentioned before, that bibliographic description and subject access will be more orientated to this highly automated environment, to the use of linking data, identifiers, as I mentioned. And yes, as librarians and catalogers, we will need these new skills, and also we will need constant training to keep up to date with this new environment. So I think some of the key competencies we will need are related to IT skills, programming, maybe, artificial intelligence, yes, and to know better how our library system works. And we will need to know and manage this machine language, as mentioned, but I'm thinking about, I don't know, ontology, RDA, BPRAME, all of that. And that implies training, constant study. And in my opinion, it also requires that the metadata professionals should be more involved in events like this one, or congresses, seminars, workshops, where we will find out what is happening with the new bibliographic standards and what are the trends, the emerging bibliographic environment, the future of metadata in relation to bibliographic description and cited access. Thank you.
And I will go next to you. John, next to you. I think my unmuting doesn't work.
Sorry about that. So this is a great question. I love this question. And in many ways, when you look at what the next 3 to 5 years might be, I think it's a lot about speed and adaptability and responsiveness, and sort of the willingness to change, but also the ability to really sort of make changes. And while I think something like artificial intelligence and machine learning might be the right answer to say for a response to something like this, when I think about this, there's really 2 things that come to mind. One is data analytics, and the second one being is governance. And that's so important for something like metadata management going forward. First off, a data-driven and user-centric approach to managing your content and your information, you need to leverage that data to create a greater access and a sort of more optimized customer experience. And that's where automation and data analytics can really have a part to play. Your data is the most valuable thing you can leverage in order to provide that greater access to the content. So good quality data enables both descriptive and predictive analytics. And that's going to be about enabling responsiveness to address all future changes for the metadata. And if we sort of think that data is the language upon which modern technological society might be built, metadata is really going to be that grammar, the construction of all the meaning of the content, the building for the content, and the ability to understand what data can really be for all of us. So in an ever-changing world, and we don't know what the next 3 to 5 years might be, metadata is going to have to be adaptable, and it's going to have to evolve over time to stay relevant to all the content that it supports. And if maintained and governed well, then metadata can be a very real contribution to all the goals we're trying to go for. So effective governance for metadata, maybe even things like just better documentation on adding terms, removing terms, the frequency of controlled vocabulary review, even ideas on better approvals going forward, and who needs to be informed when changes take place. So your metadata does need to adapt to stay relevant. And when you consider even new asset classes that we're seeing, things like social media, 3D models, podcasts becoming more common, I'm always reminded of that stewardship that we as librarians bring to the industry and bring to metadata management, so we are able to keep ahead to ensure that our metadata does not fall behind, but looks forward to the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Frédérique.
The understanding of the entity relationship model by catalogers, but also of the pivotal role of international identifiers, what is for current cataloging or to ensure the quality of catalog, constitute, in my opinion, a training issue, but also an issue of adaptation to a data ecosystem that goes beyond the library world. Catalogers will be increasingly required to integrate data or entities from other sectors, starting with archive and museum into the processing chains. So it's one of the ambition of the national entity files on which ABES and BNF are working to open up the production of entities to describe cultural or academic resources. But this openness implies a review of the quality policy on entities. In the same way, the implementation in current production of the WME tree in the future NOEMI tool requires accelerating the theoretical and applied knowledge of the IFLA LRM model, but also of the the IFR code on a new format. For us, it's in terms of new generations. So it obliges us to rethink the cataloging policy and what is good enough cataloging in IFLA LRM, I don't know. And to reflect on the adaptation of a universal bibliographic control, and I refer you to the intervention of Frances Lorech during the recent France seminar. In summary, and maybe to be more modest than John, the needs identified in the terms of increasing the skills of the teams are based first and foremost on the ability of the catalogers to think in terms of life cycle of data and no longer in terms of finished bibliographic or authority record. It's also based on the ability to manipulate data for batch processing, extraction of a corpus of data, manipulation of this data set, at least in a spreadsheet, which must become a skill for every cataloger. Beyond that, within the library profession, we need profiles similar to those of data managers, data analysts, to design scripts for processing data and to contribute to increase the quality of data. And the profile of librarians are far for including systematically this skill, which is eminently necessary for all fields of activity, but I think also to support the use of research data in academic libraries.
Excellent. I hear that we don't just describe anymore and sit there. I hear that our future is to think more about being adaptable and responsive to what happens. Have a data-driven and user-centered approaches. So usability is important, but also to understand how data works, how system works, and how we can manipulate the data to take advantage of the work that we do. I mean, it's a lot of work, right? So we have to be able to take better advantage of the work and share our work. That's what my very brief two-bullet understanding of or summarization is. So is any of you want to add anything else or a response to something that the rest of you says and about our future?
Well, I think that something I didn't mention, the importance of the schools. And yes, of course, why they're sitting there. Because yes, we are thinking in 5 years now. Yeah, it's the new students that are starting today their degree. So a good point.
Yeah, excellent point. It's I mean, in 5 years, pretty much those who are in the programs now will be ready for those. So are we preparing them for that? But also to understand that this is an area where just your degree or your preparation in your program is not enough. All of you kind of pointed to the continuous education, and I really thank for mentioning attend webinars like that or workshops, or be engaged in what is happening in the world and the new presentations or thinking about things in a different way. So that's a very important aspect of our field, that the continuous updating and training. I would like to thank all three of you. Very interesting responses. A lot of food for our thought, and I think about our future. And I will turn this now to John DeSantis, who is going to manage the questions. A reminder again, please post your questions. We'll start with questions to the panelists, and then we'll move to questions on sections if there are any. John.
Thank you, Athena. There are some questions that came through the Q&A that were answered within the Q&A, but I'm going to address those that came through the chat and the Q&A that were not answered. And The first one is from Pilar, and I assume this is for all of the panelists, or any of the panelists who care to answer it. It is obvious that adaptation to these or other standards is free for public administration and private libraries and archives. It's also obvious that its use would help to make information more accessible. But she wonders, how does this affect the usual management? How is the migration from one standard to another, and what does it entail? Or indeed, if any of the earlier speakers would care to address it, you're welcome to.
Maybe I can start with my very bad English. The migration is a huge work to go from one standard to another. I confirm that because it's not just to go from a format to another format. It's really to change the data model, and we need to change also, and that Eloise said, and also Gordon Area, we also have to change our cataloging rules and our formats. So there is lots of things to things, and a lot of works, and mostly because our data was not made in the IFLA LRM model. Some of them are all very old, and we don't have the notion of expression, for example, in our bibliographic record. So we need to extract the good data, to structure them. So it's a very huge work, and we're still working at the BNF.
Thank you. Anyone else want to address this? Okay. This is a question, again, directly to you, Frédérique. Again, it's from Pilar. It says we are implementing good information practices, and after seeing the chaos of confusing information during COVID, we use the Zotero tool to make the bibliography of everything we publish and share. But the system of linking to the authorities would also be great, and she's wondering if you have it published somewhere to see.
I don't think we have published something in this part of the data processing. There was a paper from Vincent Boulet, I think it was 2 years ago, but it was about the beginning of the chain process. It was when we get the data about the author from publisher, and we try to find if we have the correspondent authority record in all database, and how to ask an ISNI to the international ISNI registry. I don't think we have published something about the creating of the link between authority.
Okay, thank you. Another question that just came in, this is, I guess, soon for all panelists. Can you address the relationship between the people managing metadata and the people or organizations who create, maintain, and redesign the end user discovery tools? In many organizations, there's too much of a communication gulf between these groups of people.
Yes, you're right. It's difficult sometimes. the communication or the relation between people who are creating the data and people have to use it and do the, I don't know, the final tools. But it's communication, so just to be able, as I mentioned, for us to be very specific in what we want, what are the requirements, and the people in the IT staff, yeah, will be thankful for that too. So yeah, it's always a difficult relation.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just going to say that this is not a new problem. It's been, I remember one of my friends doing a dissertation actually on the communication between IT and government employees for automated systems for government. And what they have found is that IT believed that the people that do the work do not understand systems. And of course, the people that did the work believed that IT did not understand the data specifications or what the functionality of the system. So I think that one important thing is to, that's why it's important to understand data structures and system functionality for us to communicate clearly of what we want, but also to prioritize. I mean, sometimes I read that if you look at the lists of requests we make for vendors, for example, they would be working for 30 years and not solve what has been submitted. So are all of them important? Do we prioritize what's more important for the user and for better data structures versus perhaps little things and that are not as important? So I think that that's understanding the two sides and how the two work will facilitate communication and better understanding what each can offer, because they have to coexist.
And that's where I think a good model of governance can come into play, where you do have the mechanism to have people from IT, from metadata, from systems, from different or parts of the organization to work together and to address those challenges. And the good thing about governance is it's that regularized mechanism to allow for that conversation to happen. And from my experience, when I've seen things progress and move well, is when there's a good governance program attached to the metadata management to understand the changes, to understand the technological concerns, but then also to address the concerns of the user. So I think this is a great argument for the goodness of governance.
Thank you, everyone. While we're waiting for some more questions for the panelists to come in, we have some questions for the speakers who gave the lightning reports. So perhaps I could briefly turn to those. Here's a couple of quick questions for Vincent regarding the action plan for the cataloging section. The first question was, do you have a link to the action plan? And if so, could you share it? And the other is, does standardization as laid down in your action plan involve documentation of best practices relating to cataloging practices?
Thank you very much for the question. The action plan is published on the sections webpage, so you can refer to them. And what was the second question, John? Please, excuse me.
Oh, does standardization as laid down in the action plan involve documentation of best practices relating to cataloging?
Yes, and this is also why we are working very closely with our sister section, as Bibliographic and SAA section, for instance. So the work we are leading is very close to the best practice for National Bibliographic, for instance, led by the Bibliography section.
Thank you very much. The next question is for Athena. What methodologies do you use to go about gap analysis?
Yes, and I just saw that and I responded.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. At this point, what we're doing is because we are collecting data from different documentation that are different languages and different forms. I mean, some are competencies, others are just guidelines, etc. So we're waiting to see how our data look like in order to normalize them before we decide what methodology we'll be using for the gap analysis. So that was my response, the non-response response, let's say.
Thanks. Our colleague Ricardo shared a question that came in on Twitter of all places. I was thinking that we would be seeing some from the live stream, but in any case, yes, we're getting questions on Twitter. And I assume this is for the bibliography section, but I guess anyone could answer it. What is the future of the bibliography? Feed the robots with data versus not to forget manual processes and data analysis. What to choose?
John, would you like me to give a few words of answer for this? This is Mathilde.
Oh, yes, please, Mathilde.
Hi, I'm the chair of the bibliography section of IFLA. Well, with those kind of question, I always want to answer both, of course. We don't want to choose. And I think all the discussions we've had around bibliographies on the one hand and automation on the other, lead us to say that we need to find ways to use automation, AI, and so on, so that we can free the human actors to do more significant work. It will not save us time in the way an administrator might think, because we will find new tasks to perform instead. But we can't rely on one above the other, I think. I'm sorry if it's a very general answer, but I think the question was also very general. We could have a whole week of discussions around this topic.
Thanks very much. Here we have a question that just came in. Oh, okay. I assume this is for UNIMARC, but I'll read it anyway. When the PUC is creating a UNIMARC LRM mapping, how do they record it? Is there a special syntax? Do they use any special notation? Maybe it's XML or JSON or in a spreadsheet?
Eloise speaking. Well, I'm sorry to say, but it's very basic right now. We are only working on an Excel spreadsheet because it's mainly intellectual work. What we are trying to learn is we want to make sure that all LRM attributes and relationships can be expressed through UNIMARC authorities formats. That's all. So it's we basically work on Excel spreadsheets to ensure that the LRM model can be expressed through the UNIMARC format.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions. Do the panelists want to make any final remarks? If not, if there are any questions for any of the speakers or panelists yes. Oh wait, we do. We have one more question that came in. This was a question that came in the Q&A that Gordon kindly answered in the Q&A. but the Tomasz would like panelists to also address the question, can you elaborate on the prospects, future of national bibliographies as resources for data-driven research, cultural and analytics, bibliometrics, etc. Linked data services from national libraries are very promising in this regard. The research potential for those resources is amazing.
Okay, I can try. It's Mathilde again. Maybe from the point of view of the French National Library, Frédérique mentioned data.bnf.fr a couple of times. This is the way we give access to our data as data, if I may say so, that as a product for data-driven research. And while not all of the bibliography is immediately on this website, and this website is also far more than just the metadata from the national bibliography, it is there. And we are thinking about doing more with the metadata specifically from the national bibliography, giving access to it as MARC, as Excel spreadsheets, as different in different formats, so that it can be used in ways we haven't even thought about by researchers and so on, because the metadata from the national bibliography is very rich, and we are certain that it's not exploited as much as it could be.
Thanks. We have there's some questions about the relationship between ISBD and the LRM. And I'm thinking that perhaps Gordon might be able to address the issues that people were wondering about.
Sure, John. There's been a couple of questions through chat and through the SMS channel, all clustered around ISBD and LRM. So just to clarify, the LRM is a data model. It very clearly states at the beginning that even those few attributes that it mentions or specifies for specific entities are illustrative. There are very, very few actual elements in the LRM. As I said in my presentation, they're not intended for direct use in any cataloging system. They are the basis. They are the structure, the framework that provides integrity, consistency, and coherency to implementations of the library reference model. Now, RDA is a very major implementation of the LRM. The 3R project that people have mentioned took 5 years of very intense effort, during which development work on RDA itself was suspended. ISBD has nothing like these resources, and in any case doesn't need them, because one of the obvious questions which has not been asked, I'll ask it and answer it, is why bother with ISBD if RDA exists? Because RDA is a major implementation of the LRM. Well, the answer is that RDA itself is a framework for consistency and interoperability, and it necessarily has to be extremely broad. It covers all, it attempts to cover all materials, all communities, and it therefore devolves the prescription of how to use the LRM, how to implement it, is devolved through RDA down to the user communities. And this is a very important point that allows localization within a global framework, which is an IFLA goal. However, ISBD has traditionally been more prescriptive and more precise about its instructions and stipulations. And the ISBD Review Group has definitely agreed that that aspect of ISBD needs to be preserved. Not only as a good thing, but it also clearly distinguishes ISBD from RDA, and in fact allows ISBD to complement rather than compete with RDA. And that's very much the approach that the task force is taking at the moment. So another question is about the ISBD areas, etc. I must stress that ISBD doesn't deal with any LRM entity right now. Resource is not an LRM entity, and that's the only thing that ISBD is actually dealing with. However, it's very close to the LRM conceptualization of a manifestation. That's why we started with manifestation. What we're finding so far, one of the first things we need to do with the ISBD instructions is to separate out transcription from recording. That is, from cataloger intervention in what is recorded, from pure semi-mechanical reproduction of how the manifestation represents itself. So that is one of our driving characteristics, is a clear separation between transcription and recording, because not everything that is transcribed is true, but we do hope that everything that a cataloger records is as true as it can be. This is leading to other thoughts about element granularity, and currently the thinking is to broad granularity for transcribed elements, because there is no need for precision. There's a need for high recall, but low precision with transcription. On the other hand, we need high precision retrieval via controlled vocabularies, highly structured data, authority files, etc. And we're beginning to think that a more granular set of elements is required for that. It is highly unlikely that ISBD will take RDA's approach of using a single element for both transcription and recording. ISBD is unlikely to do that, and is more likely to have a separate set of elements for transcription and recording, which will make it another complementary structure to RDA itself. So I think I've addressed all of those questions with that, John.
I believe so. Thanks very much, Gordon. That was very helpful. We're just about out of time, so I'm going to wind this down by first thanking all of our panelists and our speakers for their participation in this webinar. And I also want to thank the hundreds of attendees who are watching through various social media in addition to within this webinar. We very much appreciate your attendance and your interest and engagement. If you have any subsequent questions, I put my email address in the chat, and they can be forwarded on to whoever needs to be answering them. So hope you all have a wonderful day or rest of your evening, or whatever, whatever time of day it is that you're logging in from. And thank you once again, and see you next year.